me today, I have Professor Hemant uh, Nag and Professor Mansi Shirgunkar. She's also founder of a Japanese hub. And Professor Hemant is assistant professor, Department of Life Science, Shimane University. I would like to request Hemant to tell us your journey to Japan so far, where you start and how did you reach where you are today. It will be interesting before we can hear your views on other topics, and then I will request Mansi too.
Thank you very much. First, I should thank the organizer, especially you and the whole team for giving me this wonderful opportunity to share my views. So I actually not prepare for any self-introduction, but anyways, I can still, of course, not a big problem at all.
If
So
you know
anyways,
by
I'm
my
only,
style, I never
yeah,
coordinated with you, so I wanted
no
some
worries.
everything very raw conversation.
No worries. So I did not actually prepare much at all, as I said earlier. So anyways, the main points about my background is that I'm, as you see,
Yeah.
of course, I'm an Indian. I am originally from a place close to Chennai. I grew up there, and I moved to Hyderabad for my bachelor's, and then I moved to Banaras Hindu University for my master's. And usually after that, people go to the west for doctoral studies and so on. So I chose to go east, and I went to actually Taiwan. I got a PhD in Taiwan. But again,
Oh,
you may ask like why Taiwan? But the point is that even though I was working in Taiwan, originally I wanted to actually go to Tokyo University. So I was, applying to a professor in Tokyo University. At that time, he's a very big professor. He was about to retire in a few years, so he couldn't take a new PhD student. But at the same time, fortunately, he was actually establishing a whole new lab, probably a bigger lab than in Tokyo, in Taiwan, as an invited professor. So probably, I still had the best of both of, working with Japanese in Taiwan and also experiencing Taiwanese culture and everything. So
right.
since then, I've been working continuously with Japanese people, and after that, I directly started working in Shimane University as an assistant professor. So, well, I do not have actually real studying experience in Japan. However, as a PhD student, I have been in Tokyo University a lot of times, and I did my part of my research there. So I can still say I had experienced a little bit of student life in Japan. Yes, that is
So,
a very basic background.
how is your experience so far? Not studying in Japan, but in Japan, and that too at a very prestigious university. So, what do you and working in a lab? So, what do you think? How is your experience? Yeah.
So as you see, whenever we go to any other new place, even in India. So the point I wanted to actually stress, one of the main points I want to stress today for all the Indian students, for example, especially, or even the institutions that are actually looking at bringing partnerships. Most of these institutions or people think that this is a challenge to go to a new place, to a new culture, and so on. But already most of the Indians are experiencing the same thing already within India. When you go from one state to another, we are experiencing new culture, education, language, food, everything. Honestly, it's like you can just imagine that you're going to another new state with completely different set of things. That's all. So if you think that it is not so far, you wouldn't have any problem at all. And as a personally, because you asked this question, I just, it's just from the top of my head, I'm a vegetarian and I'm still vegetarian, right? So even in Japan, even in Taiwan, and so on. So, where there is a will, there is a way. I think there is no problem at all. It's about how we take it, how we take life as it comes. So, uh, whether I'm a student in Japan or in Taiwan, we had very kind of some of them are similar issues, but the major goal was not about food or other things. The major goal was to get education, to get advancement in your life, in your profession, and so on. So automatically the pros are always much larger, bigger than the cons. So we don't really worry too much about it. Wherever we are, even if we just stay within India, we will still have lots of problems. So that's inevitable, anyways.
And how are you dealing with the language part?
So I must say I can understand really well, but I cannot really speak very fluently. The problem is that I never studied in a Japanese institution, so I was never in that kind of education mode for Japanese language. And even after starting to work here permanently, I started, the point is there, when you are a student, you can learn language. That's much, much, much easier. But once you start working, there is hardly any time. So I cannot read or write. There's no way. I can make, of course, some communication, but I cannot still, normal communication is fine. But when you have to teach, that's impossible. So, education in Japanese is impossible for me at this moment, even though I'm trying a little bit in, mixing both English and Japanese words. But as far as the normal life is concerned, it's not a problem at all. I mean, you can easily pick it up, I think.
Right. So somehow I'm not feeling lonely. I have a similar situation. So whatever I picked up like a child, Japanese, never went to any school to learn Japanese as such specifically, and same thing. So I can feel you definitely. So before we go into the more discussion, I would like to ask Mansi to come in and please tell us something more about you. Though this question is slightly relevant for me, I know you since long, but I want our audience to know that. Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Konnichiwa. Namaste. I'm based out of Pune. My name is Manasi Shirgu. I come from a totally different background from Professor Hemant. I am from language background, totally a non-technical person, non-science person. So I would like to tell my experience as a student. I was there in Japan, but both the times I was there as a student. So first time was a part of exchange program with a certain private university in Japan. And second time it was a master's degree intensive course of MA in Japanese language education. So it was a kind of deeper study into teaching methodology, learning styles and everything. So really a different experience from what I had experienced in India. The way they teach, the way they guide or they don't guide is something worth considering when you want to study abroad, particularly in Japan. So after completing my graduation in English, I completed it in Pune University. And simultaneously, I was doing my diploma, part-time diploma in Japanese language. Later on, I realized that I'm not meant for IT companies where I sit before a machine for 12 hours and work for a whole day. I'm interested in interaction with other people. So I chose teaching as my profession. And of course, along with teaching, some research work went on. And later on in 2003, I was in Japan for my master's. Afterwards, of course, I am totally into academics for last 21 years, from 1999. And since then, I've been counseling a few students for higher studies as well as for research. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your master's? What is that you learn about Japanese more than, I mean, we are just imagining that if we can read a small amount of Japanese, but you done master's. So I'm kind of interested. What was the learning? What is that you learned about that amazing language here?
Okay. Here I would like to make one important point, that somehow our students tend to think that when you go for masters, it's higher study of the language. For example, they would think that it is higher than N1 level or something like that, they have those expectations in mind, but no, actually it's different. It's a kind of immersion, I would say. So language becomes the medium of studying something else, your domain knowledge or your field of study. So I was there to study linguistics, didactics, or I would say pedagogy. And it was a different experience because I was no more trying to memorize vocabulary. Instead, I was trying to think in Japanese and study some subject matter. So that was a totally great experience. I started to express myself more in a better way. And actually, when I met my guides, I had two guides to guide in my master's. It was a privileged course, I would say. And these guides were beside me, but they didn't hold my hand. It was kind of different kind of guidance they prefer. They are with you, they will warn you if you have a pitfall before you, but they won't hold your hand throughout. So learn to stand by yourself. I felt like a baby, a toddler who is trying to walk. I fell a lot of times and then I rose again. So it was a totally different experience. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, so let's start now something interesting for our all student community. Professor Hemant, as you said that you done your higher education, or rather I say after graduation you done post graduation in India, and then again further you went to Taiwan. So I would like to know that which of course I will ask why Taiwan, and then I will ask why we should look at East for higher education when the the established trend is towards West. Yeah.
So that's a very interesting question and a hard one to actually answer, because that's more like, when I was a student. Now I can probably, when I look back, I can easily try to identify what were the qualities that actually led me to East instead of West. But again, as a student, it would be very hard for me to actually imagine what the future would be, and what are the opportunities would be, what are the challenges would be, and so on. So as I said, honestly, I never had Taiwan in mind. The main point was that I was trying to go to Tokyo University, and then it didn't work out. It didn't work out in a sense. It probably worked out even better, but it did not, materialize to go to Tokyo. But instead, I was working with the same professor. See, ultimately, when I was, the main point about doing research and PhD is that it's all about the guide and the infrastructure the guide has, and what kind of ideas they are working on, and so on. So for me, I did not really feel anything less or more, because I was actually, I could work with the supervisor I was interested in. So in that sense, it didn't really make big difference. But personally, moving from, for example, India to Taiwan and then to Japan gradually, actually was much more easy for me to come to live in Japan, if rather than directly coming to Japan from India, for example. It would have been a bit different, because in Taiwan, it was more closer to both Japanese culture and Indian culture in some senses. So that worked out, pretty positively for me. But however, I do not know about others. But in terms of Japan, instead of talking all about East, I am not an expert there, but at least from what I know, I can probably give my ideas for what it's worth about Japan. Because I'm especially working in Japanese education, higher education sector. I'm an employee of the university. It's a national university. And fortunately, I also had an opportunity to work in the management as a research administrator for a couple of years. So I did have some kind of a management experience as well. So what I can tell you, for assuming that most of these people who are listening to us are students, for example, because of the title or nature of the title of this session, there are lots and lots of opportunities. Of course, with lots of opportunities come lots of challenges. But first, let me give you a very, very briefly about the kind of opportunities that we have and what are the advantages of actually studying in Japan. We'll come to all the difficulties later, of course. I'm not going to leave them apart. So, see, the point is, higher education partnership can be at multiple levels. Can be at the institutional level, can be at the student level, can be motivated for, the motivation can be for research, that can be for joint education, and so on. So that is, let's put all of them together in one box. And the other major box that we are going to also discuss for the benefit of the student is why Japan should be considered also as a destination for study abroad for Indian students. Keeping Indian students in mind, as a student, when, for example, 15 years ago, what did I look out for? As a student, I wanted, good education. I wanted good, job. After that, see, technically, most of us, when we go out, we definitely not just invest a lot of money to study and come back. We of course want to, being a middle income country, growing economy. So of course we have much more, aspirations to get good job, to advance in our careers, to make money, to have even some or probably a lot of people also would like to settle in other countries and so on. So keeping that in mind, because I'm being very raw and direct with all these aspirations that Indian students have, because as a student, I know that these were what I was looking for. So the education, the quality of education in Japan is second to none. That is number one. Number two, the cost of education. So this is a developed country, right? And in general, we have this impression about Japan that, oh, Japan means very high quality. Any Indian will automatically just say, oh, Japan means high quality. Japan means expensive. Japan means this. So some of them are true, of course, but the point is, but we never ask any more questions as level. While we consider Japan to be very high quality, why can't we go and study there? We never ask that question. Okay, so that is already a big problem. But anyways, coming back to the actual advantages, I said high quality of education, high standard of living in general, even whether you're a student or you're a employee, whether you are a president or a prime minister, or we are all going to have the same quality of good life. Okay, and I said very low fee structure. Low fee structure because when you are looking out for when you go to the West, you are probably spending what you will only spend about 1/3 or 1/4 even of what you would spend in the West. So for the same quality of education. And the big major point is that Japan does not universities do not take extra money for foreign students, from foreign students or international students. It's the same, whatever the student is being charged, the Japanese student is being charged, whether you come, I come, anybody comes, it's all the same price. On top of that, international students get a lot of scholarships, which Japanese students do not get. So overall, it's actually a big advantage to be studying in Japan, I think, than disadvantages. So, and coming back, so I'll also tell you why it is important. It's a good idea to study, because ultimately the next step is that, okay, well, after finishing education, what do we want? We want a good job. So right now, let me put it straight. Just before COVID, okay, let's just forget about COVID. Before COVID, I'll tell you the education, number of jobs to job seekers ratio was 1.5, roughly 1.6 at some point. That means every person who is willing to get a job has 1.5 jobs out in the market. It is the employer who has to entice the students to act good students to come to their companies. It's absolutely never ever observed a phenomenon in India. So when I first saw that employers are running behind candidates to get good candidates, I was like, what? Oh, this can happen, right? That's kind of an eye opener for me when I came here in the first year. So, but however, even after COVID, okay, there was a big beating because of COVID. Right now, in this year, the latest statistics says still there is 1.1 jobs for one person. That is the kind of market employment opportunities that we're talking about. So it's not only for one person or 10 people. For every single person who is out going to seeking out for a job, he has 1.1 jobs at this moment. And of course, it's only going to recover and get better. But the point is that after graduating from Japanese universities, we will have lots of opportunities to choose to work where we like, not like what we get only, right? So with any background, you can still, having different interests, can enter into different companies, different works. So that is kind of liberating for students to actually have opportunities and more opportunities, more varieties to choose from in terms of job market. So these are the very basic things that I'm talking about. We'll go into the details later when as we go up. But what are the challenges? Of course, there are lots of challenges. The first one is the fear of unknown, I think, from the Indian students, from the Indian side. Okay, the fear of unknown, because we just do not know anything about deeply about Japan. So automatically, we do not want to try something that we are not aware of. And on the other side, Japanese universities or Japanese people in general they never promote themselves, right? So unlike in Western countries, Western institutions are so aggressive, and when you go there, probably it may not really reflect the kind of aggressive propaganda they have made. But however, on the it's completely opposite in terms of Japanese system, because if they say 1, probably they are going to give you already 10. That means they always underplay their strengths somehow, for some reason I do not know. But from my understanding, probably Japanese students have low confidence. They really have low confidence in order to go project themselves and aggressively recruit students. That is one. But honestly speaking, Japanese universities are very, at this moment, not very good, except for a few universities, large universities. Most of the universities are not so good at globalization. That is the fact. And I have to, accept that. However, most of the people, including us, think that the language is the major barrier. We don't think the rest of the things are big barriers. Honestly, the other things are bigger barriers than language. Language. So whether you know language, whether you do not know language, we can still survive. We can, if you come out here, you will still, learn. You'll be forced to learn. You will either you will learn or you will leave or whatever, right? But the point is to actually make you come here. It's not the language. It's about the lack of awareness of rest of all the things about Japan, about the opportunities, about the education system, about the standards, about low fee and so on. So this lack of information. So recently there have been many platforms. For example, the University of India Tokyo office is doing wonderful webinars and so on very regularly and trying to really put all the information out to students. That is a wonderful initiative. But that is again, in my opinion, it is doing wonderful thing, but only catering to the students who are already interested in Japan and Japanese, right? Of course, that is also very important first, to take care of those people who are already interested. But the point is, when we are talking about, at the country level, we have to actually give this information to the public widely so that they can, there will be much more demand. And there are lots of other small things that we can probably discuss later, but lack of understanding of the system and lack of platforms to actually access the information for the students. So this is mainly from the Indian perspective. But again, from the Japanese perspective, the Japanese universities and Japanese institutions do not really understand the education and culture in India. So they even probably are not aware of the different semester systems. And when they graduate, there's also some kind of mismatch in terms of graduation. For example, when here in Japan, we usually for regular undergraduate studies, it only starts in April. We do not have other entry times. So, however, for graduate studies, you can either enter in April or in October semester. The problem is Indian students don't wait. We don't wait because we will find some other opportunity. We will find some other thing because we do not see the bigger picture of the advantages of working or studying and working in Japan. The point is like, okay, I did not get admission right now because the students usually pass, for example, say class 12, they will pass in March or so. The results will be in April or May, for example. By that time, that means if they really have to come to Japan, they have to wait for another 1 year or 8 months or 10 months. So the point is nobody wants to wait because we just don't have that kind of thing because we feel that we will be left behind if we wait for another half a year, 1 year. So those things must be taken into account. From Japanese perspective, we have to probably make them understand and then find ways to actually accommodate Indian students. So these are much more structural problems which we cannot solve in 1 or 2 meetings, or so it has to be at the very high level, the government level, education ministry level policy matters. But the point is that even Japanese institutions and Japanese policymakers are not really aware or sensitive. Maybe they are aware, perhaps, but they are not unable to still, address this major issue. So these are several things that I wanted to actually just point out at the outset. Probably, we will discuss more in detail as the session progresses. Thank you very much.
Right. Thanks for your really good explanation on the opportunities and challenges. As we see, there are many opportunities, but definitely there are challenges also. And I would like to come back to Dr. Mansi because she went to Japan for education and twice. So what was the challenges that you faced as a language student? And what is your own experiences and what is your suggestion for the students?
I would like to classify these hurdles into 2 types actually. One is non-academic and another one is academic. When we talk about non-academic hurdles, it's something like having enough of information, awareness, as Professor Hemant said, I totally agree with him, because we really lack the students community, even the teachers. They don't have sufficient information about the postgraduate courses, PhD courses, and the funding available, even the scholarship programs. Of course, on internet you will find a lot of information, but we don't have a platform where we will get the relevant consolidated information as such. And there are certain scholarships or programs which you can apply once you land in Japan. So that uncertainty, I think, is quite difficult for a student to decide. It becomes a crucial point, because he is not very sure that he will get certain funding, and he wants that assurance beforehand, before he goes to Japan. So I think that becomes one of the hurdles. So this kind of information will help the students. There should be some forum, some platform which provides and provides such information and guides the students. Secondly, there is one more way, that is when students apply directly to the university, they need to find an assured and appropriate faculty member to guide them, and the guide has to accept them as their student. So students are obviously unaware of what type of programs university has, or which department is strong, or they are, of course, they don't have their contacts, they don't have their network in Japan. So we should bring together the people who have such information, the university officials who can provide such information, and about the guides or researchers who are ready to guide students. I think that will help a lot, because I myself am guiding a few students who want to go for further studies in Japan, and they're trying to find a guide there. Then when it comes to academic hurdles, I think that even in case of certain entrance exams like EU, in such a big country like India, we hold EJU only twice, and that too only in New Delhi. So I think that also has contributed to a lesser level of awareness among Indian students, because EJU only happens in Delhi, and whoever is interested, who comes to know about such an exam, has to go all the way to Delhi, take that exam, and then wait for the results. As you already know, the whole process of application and getting the approval and everything takes at least one whole year. So that may be contributing such lesser number of students going to Japan for further studies. And as far as academic hurdles are concerned, I think everybody by now has realized that more or less, be it any board, SSC, HSC board, state board, CBSE or ICSE, we still are dependent on the content and students mugging up the content, learning and pouring it in exams. They will have to memorize the content and write the exams and get good scores. So that way of thinking doesn't help in postgraduate courses in Japan, because they have a different kind of education system. Even from school level, they make their students think. So when I ask my students, even here in postgraduate course, what they think about a certain issue or a problem, they are not able to state it in precise words. And if at all they are able to phrase it rightly, they are not able to substantiate their views with sufficient data. And this is a typical Japanese way of doing it, because they will always have urazuke, as they call it. They'll always backing of good data when they claim something. So this way of thinking has to be changed as far as Indian students are concerned, because I get calls and emails from many students who want help in writing their research plan. When it comes to science and everything, I can't help them, but at least in language studies, I can. But absolutely, there is no exposure in undergraduate courses when it comes to research or research methods or anything like that. We just answer the papers, and it doesn't go beyond the textbooks. So something that becomes a challenge when we enter a postgraduate course in Japan.
Right. So, of course, these are the challenges. I want to continue to ask you another question. That there seems to be two distinct thing happening here. One, some students go to language way. They study a language, and ultimately, when you study the language, there is a kind of a fixed mindset that you are either doing a translation interpretation or you're teaching. Is there as a non-technical but a language expert, is there any other career? That is question number one. Question number two, somehow it looks like if you're technically highly educated, the language part goes a little softer even in Japan sometimes, for a job, and so on. So I mean, when we talk to technical people, they said, I done like engineering, then I done some post graduation masters, then why do I again want to learn the language? I don't want to go to Japan because that is something now beyond my. Uh, I don't want to waste more time on that. So I want your perspective on this both. How uh,
Yeah.
to answer them. Yeah.
Okay. Let me answer your first question first. That is, apart from translation, interpretation, and teaching, there are many more avenues for language professionals who are purely from language background. Though they are non-technical, they are always wanted when there is some coordination job required. When two companies meet, a Japanese company and an Indian company, they need a coordinator. And from negotiations, business talks to a project. I have so many students and colleagues who have been working in Japanese companies as well as in Indian companies, who are there with very good salary. They are employed in various groups, and they are coordinating different software projects. They may not have that deep technical knowledge, but they know how to coordinate that project. They know how to fill up the gap which otherwise would have existed if the person wasn't there. So they fill up that communication gap so that the project goes on and the deadlines are met and there is no misunderstanding between the two companies or the two teams. So when it comes to a customer and a supplier, or two different companies doing a joint venture, certainly a language professional has a very it has a very great value addition. This role has a value addition. And secondly, when it comes to a technical person or a science background person not knowing the language so much, I do understand their perspective, because they have spent so much of time, energy, and even money studying their own field, own subject, that they are not able to spare that much of time studying language. But if they treat this Japanese language as a tool of communication, it's going to help them. So what a teacher or education system has to do is provide them functional Japanese. What teachers tend to do is use same textbook for everyone. So it takes time, because you compel that software engineer, and you teach them how to write each and every kanji. He has to remember 500 kanji. He gives up. So obviously he is not going further in Japanese language study. Instead, if we customize the course as per the needs of the students. For example, if we have certain group of software engineers who are about to fly to Japan, we have to teach them customized textbook, or we can prepare such materials. And if you can't prepare by yourself, you can, very well bring in that IT and software vocabulary into your content. That can be definitely done. And that's what a language professional, more than that, I would say attention should do. That is, develop a course. Course design has to be done for such groups. It should depend on the needs of the students. That's what I feel. And we have done this before, and it helps a lot.
Right, right. I got your point. But yeah, so I bring in Professor Hemant. What's your take on this as a technical background person, and then what is your opinion and suggestion for the students?
So, well, as you actually the second question was about whether the Japanese industry is softer when you are good at technical stuff, right? Well, I am already an example here. So I am a technical person, and so I'm primarily doing education and research, and it does not mean that I can just be without any Japanese at all. So that is, a lie. So the point is that you have to understand the sensitivities of the other person, of the employer or whoever, and try to actually, at least learn where to address those, at least to be able to communicate with these people that you are working with, at least. Of course, if you're really interested in language and culture and people and so on, of course, you'll learn more language, you'll get into society and so on. But my point is, Japan is a specialty driven society. Somebody should be special in something. Okay. If you're not special in anything, you don't fit in this society, to be honest. So you don't have to know everything. You don't have to even, as long as you are an expert in your domain, that is enough in terms of technical aspect. So they respect you, you get complete respect. But if you claim to, and another thing is also about honesty. Okay. I'm not saying we are dishonest people, but the point is the way we think about honesty is a completely different picture. Okay. Honesty is 99% is not honesty. Honesty is 100% in Japanese system, right? So if you can say, I've been 99% honest and told you everything except 1%, that is not considered honest. Okay. So why I said honesty is a problem, or the point that we should consider is that if you do not know, there is no shame in accepting that we do not know. Japanese person will not question, you are not knowing something. Okay. Only question is that if you say you know something and you don't do it, that is the problem, right? So, and I mean, I'm saying all these things, it has some tinge of culture in it, right? It's not just about, you know, business or technical stuff. And another thing is that when we say something, when we give a word, they will consider it is done. Okay, because that is how they are. When we ask something, Japanese person, when probably he may not, directly accept. If he doesn't accept, that means he's not doing it. But if he's really going to say yes, I will do it, he will give his life to do it. Right? There is no more, back negotiations. There is no going back at all, even one step. If this, so that's the point. So once you understand this, then you will also not just agree for everything. Oh, you cannot say yes for everything. Right? You cannot be an yes man. So you have to be aware of what is your limitation, and you have to be very clear about whether you'll be able to deliver whatever is required of you within a certain time and so on. So in that sense, we can simply, honestly, even take more time and to do our things. But the point is, that is what I was talking about, to be honest, when you're employed in this kind of atmosphere. So if you have these qualities, automatically, they will understand your true nature, and Japanese language will fade away. Okay. So Japanese language is of course still important for you to communicate, but you are not going to write, literature. You are not an expert in literature or anything. So unless you are writing a book, then you don't have to worry too much about Japanese language, I think. As long as you're able to communicate basic communication and good at what you do, I think there will be no problem at all.
Right. As far as I am concerned, I think I am experiencing that. I've been doing business in Japan with Japan since 2005. And what you say is exactly the same. As long as you understand and match the expectations with the Japanese, I think they are also ready to forgive you for a language sometime. But that's the case of people who are in a business and they cannot now go back and learn the language. But let's take this point to Dr. Mansi, that okay, we learned, we graduated, we post graduated, we done a lot of language, but it seems like, this is my own experience, that when we try to hire somebody for a language or something, ultimately I mean, this is no disrespect to anybody, but sometimes I feel like that I know more inner vocabulary than the somebody who learned actually the Japanese. Uh, Probably maybe I went with my Japanese client off the time for some nomikai, and so I know more. But why do what this student should do that actually, they they express themselves, they pass the interview, they get job or something like that based on their language skill.
Yes, actually, this question has been troubling me for many years. So I have taken initiative personally to solve this question, at least on a small scale, at a personal level. I've started designing courses from practical point of view. When it comes to office Japanese, I do understand that there is a whole lot of textbook which are available in the market, and they talk about business Japanese. But certainly there are certain things which are not outrightly written in the textbook. They are understood within the community. And perhaps people like you who have been in business for so long, they understand it very well. But they are not there in the textbook. So I think practical approach is needed whenever such a course is designed. And what the kind of Japanese that is used in business, or more than business, I would say simple office Japanese for that matter. And the superficial expression which is used and the real behind it, that is something like reading between the lines that cannot come all of a sudden. For a student, it is very difficult unless he experiences that society, that nation. So I think some kind of practical approach needs to be there in different courses when it comes to Japanese, because unfortunately, most of our students in India have been targeting JLPT, that is Japanese Language Proficiency Test. Of course, they also have changed their format since 2010, and it has become more, functional in nature and more practical in nature. But still, it's a multiple choice question type of test. So it doesn't measure your speaking skills or writing skills or communication skills in any way. So we need to have courses where students get to use the language. Today, the students know about the language, but they don't use the language, and that's not going to help, because unless they perform, it's something like, I always give an example of swimming or cricket. It's like mugging up all the rules of the game, but I haven't played it. It's something like that. So you have to do it actually in life to know about it and to perform in that language. So that's what I think is necessary as far as language is concerned. It's a performance after all.
True, it's a performance. Of course, you really need to get out there and speak and survive, and then
Yes.
you can really use it as flexible. They said that if you can think in the language, then you can speak well. If you translate that language in your brain, then
Yeah.
definitely there is some gaps will be there. So in the interest of time, I want both of you to give your final suggestions and cautions to all our student community as well as the professional community. They are trying their they're trying to do the career in Japanese, or they are trying to do career in technical things, but in Japan or with Japan. So your opinion. Maybe we will start with Dr. Mansi, and then we will go to Professor Hemant. Your final thoughts on that.
I would advise that the students who want to study in Japan, first they would gather as much information as they can from various sources. Now, even University has been conducting webinars very frequently. Even JASO has conducted such seminars regarding scholarships, various types of scholarships. And secondly, they need to plan out their career, because once they decide on doing something, they can go further on that path. So language, at least I can say that keep your approach more practical, see how you can use the language. And I've observed that students tend to work individually. It's good to have a competitive spirit, but collaboration and cooperation always helps more. So study in groups, try to converse in groups, try to have group talks, discussions in Japanese. That will help you more to express yourself and use that language. I think that will help you a lot. Otherwise, internet has made many things so easy. If compared to my student age, I think students have a flood of materials over internet, and it's free of cost, and they can avail any kind of video, audio, or even written material on internet. So I think they should make wise use of all those resources out there. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Yes, Professor Hemant.
Yeah, so I would like to actually give students some practical advice as well. So honestly, the actual scenario right now for getting into undergraduate courses are only for those students, whether it is from India or any other elsewhere, with very high language proficiency, with very high Japanese language proficiency. Without that, entering Japanese undergraduate programs will be very hard, and it's impossible, I would say. And so for those students who are really good at Japanese language and entering any kind of undergraduate course, you are most welcome. Please go ahead. And the large portion of students I would really recommend to not wait and just jump in is for graduate studies, for master courses and PhD courses, where you do not really need to be having a lot of, high language proficiency. Even without any language, you can still apply, and you can even get admitted. And in terms of you're a technical person, unless you are not in humanities and social sciences, as long as it is because we are a lot of the engineering country, so I think in that case, for engineers, for any kind of natural sciences, pure sciences, engineering and other technology and so on, will have no difficulty in entering Japanese higher education institutions. And they can come here and still learn some basic communication, and then impress to get employment in the future. So that will be the first practical advice. And Japan as a destination, why I would rather suggest to all Indians who are interested in the East is that, see, Japan is a very peaceful country. It's a very safe country. So you will have a completely different kind of experience about your own life, because what you're thinking about on a daily basis will be completely different. And it's a very systematic society, so you don't really think too much about day-to-day affairs. Whether I can catch a train, whether I can go in certain time, and so on. Whether I'll be able to get this or get that. So your daily life will be pretty automatic. Probably you will not think so much, and just think about how to do better things in life. About your work, about your family, and so on. And it's a very affordable education. And then once you get employment, of course, it'll be also well. So one last final tip I want to give to students to be aware of is, if you want quick growth, Japan does not offer that. Let me be very clear. If you want a steady growth and a stable growth, Japan is the place, because it's more like, once you get employed by either private companies or public sector, doesn't matter, more or less the job is guaranteed for life. So that point people do not even understand. The kind of security that comes with Japanese employment is huge. So if you want very quick growth, it doesn't happen here. So, well, probably in IT industry it does still. You can keep hopping from one company to another, and you may have. But the point is, if you want a peaceful environment, clean water, whatever. I don't want to get into that kind of specific, but the point is, in terms of higher education, the quality is great and it's affordable. And I hope students can really take advantage of it and advance in their career. Thank you.
We have a little bit of time. So I have one question to you, Professor Hemant, and then one question to Dr. Mansi. I want you to tell something about your university or your institute or your organization quickly, like what is in offer in a Shimane University for the student, and then Dr. Mansi, what is in offer in your organization for the student and how it can benefit.
Okay. Thank you. In fact, the good opportunity. So Shimane University is a national university. We have 6 faculties from medicine, law, literature, arts, sciences, engineering, and so on. So I actually belong to Department of Biosciences. Basically, it is the Faculty of Life and Environmental Sciences. So there is an international English programs in our faculty for life and environmental sciences, which covers all aspects of biology, biotechnology, and so on. And also there is another faculty of science and technology where all kinds of engineering, including physics, geophysics, geochemistry, and so on, are also there. And I must tell you, our university has some many research centers specific to certain areas. I would like to mention a couple of them. One is Raman Spectroscopic Center, Raman Center for Biomedical Applications. That's exactly where I started. So you can see Sir C.V. Raman's photo in the background. So my specialization is Raman spectroscopy and microscopy for single cell imaging and disease diagnostics. So I'm trying to develop some Raman spectroscopy based tools. And so that is one center that we have, which is very active in doing Raman spectroscopy. On the other way, in other sense, there are also this region is also very, very famous for extracting, for steel making. In fact, the oldest Japanese technology of steel making actually comes from this region, which is it is called as Tatara steel making, and we have a next generation Tatara center that is actually serving for research and development needs for advanced metal materials. For example, we have large cluster of small industries that are actually making specialized aero parts for aircrafts and vessels and so on. That kind of ecosystem is already here. So our university has very strong research component that adds value to these local small scale industries. And another last thing I would like to mention is that we are very strong in geology in general, and also we have a UNESCO center for earthquake, disaster management. So if you are interested in that area, there's a very large center, and that will be very, very useful. So in addition to that, if you go to websites in our university website, you'll be able to get more information. Even though most of them are in Japanese, you can always use Google Chrome to auto translate and still get all the information you need. And if you need any more information, you can always write to me. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Dr. Mansi, yes.
Yeah, the Japanese Hub actually provides career counseling and planning service for students. And when it comes to higher education, certainly for Japan. And otherwise, we also provide different modules in business, basic and advanced. And it's particularly from practical approach as far as listening, speaking, and reading, writing is concerned. So you would get to use that language in an office setup, and the way you have to present in Japanese, you become an employee of a company. You need to converse in Japanese in an official situation, in a formal setup, I would say. So the content sees to it that you are trained into actual speaking skills, and also in presentation in Japanese, because what happens is usually our students are not used to present in Japanese. So usually we train them in how to present in Japanese, how to present data, different types of data, how to talk about it. And otherwise, in reading, we train them in writing business emails, writing their own resume, and we also teach them how to face interviews of different types, university interviews and company interviews. And also we give them experience of actual business documents, like show, that is estimate, or that kind of document which usually students don't come across, the actual business documents. So we make them read it and they have to make sense out of it. So that kind of training we have been conducting for last 1 year, and the response has been really very good from all across the country. So I would definitely like to welcome more and more students and take the benefit of the services. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mansi Shirgulkar and Professor Hemant. I really, really appreciate that you take out a time and today guide our student community and professionals. Definitely, this session is going to be one of the most valuable sessions today, and many people will appreciate. The best part is that this session is going to remain there on a YouTube channel, so people can see it later on also on demand. So thank you very much once again, and it was a pleasure talking to both of you. Thank you.